Okay, where we go. Sexuality and mental health problems. Little ditty about some things that we're all familiar with. Mental health problems affecting your sexuality or your abilities, whatever. Um, it's a relatively common thing around the world. And there are even statistics that, when they're broken down, reveal just how prevalent they are. Um, the prevalence among women is higher than men. I'm not going to give you all the percentages, but 18.9% of adults in the United States live with a mental illness. It's kind of a higher percentage than you might have thought. Um, I don't know how many millions that would be. I think um, I think 1% or something like that of the 1.2% of the American population is like a million people or somewhere in that. I probably have the figures all wrong, but anyway, bottom line is a lot of people. So counselors in high demand, psychologists are in high demand. There's sexual problems that are caused by mental illness, and we'll be brushing over some of these, mainly headings, because again, as usual, you need to read this stuff. Sexual problems caused by mental illness. There's a stigma. If you don't believe there's a stigma in terms of a mental health deal, then you've probably been somewhere else. There's a stigma that's attached to anything related to use a lay term, abnormality in a person's behavior, emotions, etc. So the stigma makes it a bit difficult when you diagnose someone. They don't want to talk about it. They will come to you, but they want to hide something. Sexuality, sexual things, dysfunction. It's one of the things they want to hide. And you know as well as I do, being in the field, at least entering the field, as all of you are, most of you are, you have to overcome the stigma, but you have to not contribute to it, I suppose. So you're aware of it, you fight it, and you have to demand honesty, not in a militaristic way, but in a way that they understand that they can't be treated unless we know what the true problem is. So and part of it's overcoming the stigma. You need to thoroughly investigate a person's mental health history, and you need to even include the medical side. What kind of medications might they be on? What have they taken in the past? What are they taking now? These can have an effect on their mental health related to sexuality. A lot of times it boils down to a performance thing, as you can probably guess. So let's look at a couple of these. Let's look at just a very few of these areas and just kind of give you an overview of what you're going to be dealing with. Depressive and bipolar disorders. The most common disorder reported is depression, and that's all over the world. And it contributes to low self-esteem. You don't feel too good about yourself. I'm sure that you know a depressed person, and it wouldn't surprise me if you knew a clinically diagnosed depression, major depressive disorder. It's pretty prevalent out there, unfortunately. What happens, among many other things, in depression, and we're of course in a sexuality course, so that's where we want to focus. Well, you develop a pessimism toward happiness in a sense. I'll give you a word for that in a minute that you probably already know anyway. And there's a tendency to isolate. And by the isolation and the pessimism, then you develop a really crummy outlook on sexuality and relationships. People that are depressed don't really want to do anything. They lose their motivation to do anything because nothing is pleasant any longer. There is a very big association between SD, sexual disorders, and depression. There are done studies all over the world with this. Major depressive disorder, particularly, and it can cause all kind of things. Not just lack of drive, but even the physical part of this. It can disrupt that. People with depression are 50% more to 70% more at risk of developing a sexual disorder. So it's kind of a comorbid thing. I have depression, so I develop a sexual disorder. Well, I have a sexual disorder, it adds to my depression. So it's one of those kind of deals. And the depression, once it has had the effect of giving birth to a sexual disorder, then the risk of the depression increasing is something like 130 to 200%. That's a huge figure. So again, comorbidity in that realm nonetheless. Dysthymia, which has been kind of changed, it's now called persistent depressive disorder, or it's listed with persistent depressive disorder and major depressive disorder, is basically being incapable of finding pleasure in what were once pleasurable things. And that's what I mentioned just a few minutes ago. So this leads to a condition where it doesn't matter what it is, including sexual activity, you don't find pleasure in that anymore. That becomes a sexual disorder. Medications used to treat depression and bipolar, particularly antidepressants, can cause sexual side effects. So what we're building here is a little unit of causes related just to that one thing. Now we consider things like anxiety disorder. That interferes with sexual response. Symptoms, conditions can be disordered. They can be highlighted by negativity. And so you begin to avoid certain activities that maybe cause the onset of anxiety. And that's the physiological part of it. The cognitive part of it is tricky because when you suffer an anxiety, and we're talking GAD here, when you suffer an anxiety attack, you're getting the same input basically in the same what we would term excitement, in this case anxiety, raised blood pressure, all those things that you're familiar with that are symptoms of a GAD attack. And that may cause you to have an anxiety worsen while you're experiencing the attack. And then you don't want to participate in something that exacerbates that. So it's really a nasty little deal. It can cause sexual, it can cause social avoidance, which obviously is going to have an effect on your sex life. I'm doing this thing at almost 10 o'clock at night. I apologize, I'm sleepy. PTSD, another area that has an effect on this, can anyway, particularly if it's brought on by sexual abuse. when you were a youngster can obviously have you in a state of mind to want to avoid sexual activity. And there's a there's a component of this that I think some people don't realize. People just say, "Oh, PTSD. Oh, yeah, there's those people that they think about the war and they go, yeah." Well, it's not always the case. PTSD, obviously, as you know, I'm sure, can come from anything. You don't even have to experience the event itself. You can witness it. I've seen it happen in real life, but it can be anything that sets it off. That sets the um, um, flashback. I'm gonna call it. I was trying to think of a better word, and I really can't. So if I have a flashback, it can be set off by breathing, smelling someone's breath that may remind you of your event in terms of abuse. The lighting in a room, your book mentions that. So you think of something, any kind of a sensory activity or a sensory experience can reignite your experience with the abuse, which contributed to the PTSD, or actually was the genesis of it. So just a few things to think about. Military couples. There was a study done with these, and the incidence of suicide. Military couples that seek help for PTSD, and then it exacerbated, it became a sexual disorder, or a part of it did, have a much higher suicide risk in the case of men than women. I think maybe they missed the statistics. It's probably because there were more men in the military than women. It could be simple as pie. But nonetheless, PTSD, just another area. And then the rest of these, some of these I just want to list for you real quick. Feeding and eating disorders. These are in your book. Substance abuse disorders. Some that you may not have thought about. So on and so forth. Neurodevelopmental disorders, just another area. Narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, somatic disorders, personality disorders of all kinds, antisocial personality disorder, serious business, and schizotypal personality disorder. Just a few of these things that can be going on in your brain and emotions and cause you to have a failure in the area of sexuality. So something to think about. Try to keep these brief, doesn't work. And I'll be checking in with you again in a day or three. Take care.